What's a sign that someone grew up poor? Story 1. Odd hoarding behaviors of things you probably should have gotten rid of, out of fear you won't be able to replace them easily. I keep a stack of boxes broken down because there's still this fear in the back of my mind that I'll have to move again at a moment's notice. I make a decent salary now and have lived where I am for nearly 7 years, but I still can't part with those boxes, despite the space they take up. Under the bed, behind the chest of drawers. Yeah. I still have them. Story 2. Immense financial anxiety. Literally. I still get anxious when I spend money on literally anything, including bills and food, which are essentials. I have the money in my account for the next 3 months' worth of bills, aside from mortgage. My budget is still based on that money not being there and pushing out bills to align with incoming money. After next week, as long as no more surprises come up, I should have a breathing room amount. Inflation isn't helping though. I'm just so tired. Story 3. I grew up poor and my husband grew up middle class. Whenever we have guests, I am constantly asking people if they got enough food. Is anyone still hungry? I can make something else. My husband will inquire about the quality of the food and if it is to everyone's liking. I think when you grow up poor, food is very much quantity over quality. Story 4. Scanning the menu for the cheapest options possible when at a restaurant. It's okay, the soup is really enough for me. I was invited to go to Disney World with my best friend in high school. I did that for the first part of the week in every restaurant we went to, usually ordering a cheeseburger while my friend and his parents were ordering big-ass steaks and all sorts of seafood. My friend's dad stopped me when we were walking back to the hotel and asked if I was a picky eater. I told him no. He asked why I kept ordering the same thing every time we went out. I said, well, that's what I usually order when I go out to eat, and didn't want to order anything more expensive because it wasn't my money. He kinda chuckled, assured me that he wasn't going to run out of money and permanently banned me from ordering a cheeseburger when I was on a trip with them, unless we went somewhere that specialized in burgers. I spent the rest of that trip eating lobster, crab and steak. Story 5. Not being in the know with all the cable shows. My parents never had cable their whole lives. We had 12 channels on the rabbit ears, and then eventually in high school my parents got Netflix when it was new, before streaming was mainstream. If I was homesick, it was Magic School Bus, Arthur, Cyber Chase, Zoom, Dragon Tales, Crap Brothers, Bob Ross, Julia Child, The Price is Right, Maury, Jerry Springer, Tyra Banks, The Simpsons, King of the Hill, and of course all of the infomercials. Story 6. Lack of exposure to cultural events. Missing out on experiences that others may take for granted, such as attending concerts, traveling, or participating in extracurricular activities. Really identify with this. I grew up very poor in an affluent area, and I remember kids constantly talking about a resort town 2 hours away that everyone went to for holidays, where many families owned homes. I could basically name all the businesses and activities at this resort without ever having been there. The story of my life, having to explain to people that just because I grew up in a certain area doesn't mean I grew up with the same luxuries they did. I had classmates whose parents purchased or handed them down foreign luxury vehicles before they could even legally drive. That's how much money they had. I distinctly remember a group of affluent kids bragging in a circle about whose dad has the most money. One of them, in an attempt to win this superficial game, said, "Oh yeah, my dad's so rich, I could crash my Cadillac and he'd buy me the latest Mercedes-Benz." Needless to say, we lived extremely different lives. I lived in one of the smallest houses in town, and grew up in a paycheck-to-paycheck household, as my dad claimed bankruptcy during the 2000s recession. I grew up feeling guilty for birthdays and Christmas because I knew although I wanted something, it would only put my parents further behind on necessary expenses. Yet again, I'm constantly explaining to people in this town and ones who know where I'm from that we're not all rich here. Story 7. A personal anecdote. For backstory, I'm the primary financial provider for my wife and I, but I really don't care what she does with our money. If our bills are paid and we have food to eat, I'm fine. I grew up fairly poor, so I never really bought anything for myself, or asked for anything to be bought for me. A few months ago, a video game I had wanted to play was on sale for like $2.50, and I said to my wife, "Hey, can I buy this?" Not really because I wanted permission, but because I hadn't logged in to check our financial state and didn't know if the money was already set aside for bills. But she looked at me and said, "Did you just ask permission to buy a $2.50 game with your own money?" So, I'd say the hesitance to buy anything for yourself, regardless of how stupidly cheap it was. Story 8. Will eat all of the food on their plate, even after feeling full, because they can't waste food. Eating all of the leftovers, even if it's gross or unsavory. I mixed up sugar for salt in a recipe and it made the flavor just off enough it was gaggable. But I grew up poor, and I'm still poor, so I choked it down. I also live alone and recipes are generally making 4 servings, so I ate all 4 of those servings. Was also sent home with some food from someone's grandmother. It what the meal was, but it was gross. But edible. And 2 meals worth of food. And I returned the Tupperware with homemade chocolate chip cookies. This is the first time I have spoken ill of that food and I would eat it again if given the chance. I mean I didn't die, so whatever. Story 9. When I was in elementary school a girl asked me why all my shirts were just solid color and not brand name logo shirts. Made me feel insecure. So, I'm going to go with an obvious answer here, clothing and style. I still wear my clothes until they have holes and stains. I have the money to buy new brand name clothes, but why? I'm not trying to impress anyone. Story 10. Hesitant to go to the doctor when medical care is needed because of co-pays even if they can afford it. If you're not bleeding or unconscious, you're not going. My parents' thoughts on medical care growing up in rural Kansas. Story 11. Spending any windfall money. The bone-deep certainty that money will just go away. There will always be another surprise bill or the car will break down. If you get some extra money, you buy the kids a trampoline because for once you don't have to say, no, we can't afford that. I'm very glad to see this answer. I've seen a lot of I don't spend money because I never had it. And that's fine, but there's a very real backside to that same coin. I grew up pretty poor. As an adult, I have an issue with spending money as soon as I get it because I'm afraid it'll go away. It's caused some tension between my wife and I at times. Like, I don't know if we will have the money later. I want to buy all the Pokemon cards for the kids while we have the money because they're really getting into it and my anxiety brain is afraid we won't have money to do it later. Story 12. I'm a foster kid. I was always poor and pretty much had nothing. These are habits I have. I hoard food. They're still edible if they're past their expiration date as long as it's not moldy or something. My basement is stocked for a zombie apocalypse. I never throw out old containers unless they're moldy or something, clean that shit out, good as new. I also always have leftovers. I never waste food and eat everything on my plate. I feel guilty when I buy something I don't necessarily need. I add water to empty soap containers so they're full. I cut empty toothpaste tubes so I get every last drop. I reuse a lot of stuff. The disposable stuff doesn't need to be disposed most of the time. You can reuse them.